first of all, I want to just thank Consumers Energy and Allegiance and the groups that we've worked with the foundation as well, for actually really sticking to this. I mean, there's an energy here in Jackson, and I'm a believer that, again, like Dave said, this is like 25 years overnight, but you've been doing this stuff here, and you'll create a tipping point in this city faster than you think. All the stuff you see that's happening in Midtown now, I can tell you, I joined Wayne State University, worked there starting in 2004, and when I got there, at night, it was a ghost town. I mean, in 2004. Today, things are happening, and it's because of the effort of Dave Egner and Mosey and other people around him. But these two really have a story to tell, and hopefully it'll be in the Detroit Almanac, one day. Okay, so let's take 10 minutes. I talked to Alan. He said 10 minutes of questioning is appropriate before we hit the lunch. So I'm going to moderate a little bit. There's only one mic, and I'll just point at people, so we'll try to keep order that way. So here, you can take that. Mic out here. So questions.
I'll ask one. How did the demographic mix change in Midtown over, say, a 10-year period?
We did what we thought was an important report called 7.2 Square Miles. If you go to 7.2 Detroit, spelled over.com, you'll see the report. We actually were afraid of some of the media talking, and some of the neighbors talking about gentrification, and we're concerned about doing a demographic study. So we did our own and captured a great deal of data. An amazingly diverse neighborhood. If anything, the neighborhood's become more diverse. It's not been an inflow of only white population and an outflow of only people of color. So the median household income is still at about $20,000. So it's not in any way gentrified. I always argue in Detroit, people start arguing gentrification, and I always say the same thing. Define that in a city where 40% of the land mass is vacant. I'd love to have a little gentrification, so we can really start the debate about how to fix it. Sue and team and others are doing everything possible to make sure that doesn't become an issue, and how they're building these mixed-use projects. Many of those projects are mixed use. They have a percentage of market rate and then below market rate housing to make sure we're keeping that mix.
And I think you do have to be intentional about that strategy. Otherwise, with as much going on and as much investor interest in our neighborhood, it could easily all just go market rate, believe me. So in almost all the deals we're in, we will fund some and get involved in some that are straight up market rate, but we also just backstop a small loan for the affordable housing nonprofit in the neighborhood to make sure they can close. So, and then a lot of them are 80-20s or 70-30s, 60-40s, we've got all the different kinds. We did a baseline of the amount of affordable housing as part of this Living City initiative that we actually have income-restricted housing in Midtown. Over all the units, we're at 30%. That's a really good proportion. And we're trying to keep a 30% proportion. And so that's why you have to be intentional about it, because eventually, as a lot of the income restrictions sort of go on these properties, developers will just drop it and they can get a higher return. And you're going to get that. So on the other side, then you better be making sure that some of the housing that's coming in on the front end is also going to use some of the subsidies to maintain you have some affordability for the workforce and for other folks that just want to live in a corridor that has all those social services and universities and other cultural offerings that need to be open to everyone.
Sue, I have two questions. Can you talk about the dollars needed to fund your organization on an annual basis, where it comes from and how much it is? You can't do that.
Sure. Oh, no, I can tell you.
The second question I have is, can you talk about the dollars related to the developments that you have done so far?
Yeah.
How much are we talking?
Okay, so on the operating side, we're at about 2.8, 2.9, where we have a couple of large, as Dave said, $500,000 a year commitments from two of our anchors. We also have a $250,000 operating grant a year from Hudson from Ford Foundation, a little more than that from the Kresge Foundation, so we have matching. We have public space dollars that help with our public space budget of $250,000 a year from the Community Foundation. We have administrative income. So for all these different programs and projects, you know, we get a 10% administrative fee, and so that helps, of course, pay for the staff who are working directly on those. So you have to be factoring that into your core operating. We do have some special grants. DTE Energy funds some of our small business work, and actually now Chase and BNC have come in to fund some of the work around this small business development. Because I think everybody's seeing the benefits of that, and especially the banking institutions see it as well. You know, they want commercial clients to deposit in their bank. So, you know, we are getting some additional that will help at least offset a dedicated person. You know, so, I mean, it's all, I think, part of that. I'm not saying it isn't a struggle to get to that number every year, because it is. We also have dues, a membership dues structure, but other than the big anchors, they're pretty modest. We bring in about $200,000 a year in a bucket from all the other miscellaneous, you know, 150 other dues-paying members that are in the neighborhood. We think we can probably get more if we have an aggressive campaign. We're just too busy to do that. But, you know, it's going to take it takes a mix of a lot of different strategies to get to that. And I think you're going to have to be creative here about how you can make it attractive for lots of different players in lots of different ways. But your organization's going to have to do a lot of work, partly to get some of the fees and things that are also necessary to make any of this work. So it's you know, it's complicated, but it's doable. One of the things I'll say is one of my small business people made this comment the other day. I thought it was the best line ever. I want to have t-shirts. Doing work in Detroit is challenging yet possible. I thought that was like great. That so describes the situation. You know, you can get to the end of the finish line, but it's always going to be challenging. So, so you can do it in Jackson too. Oh, now in terms of the real estate, oh my gosh, well that's really a whole different bucket because we play so many different roles in real estate. So right now, we've had the $20 million in capital. It was the first round of Living Cities we've been deploying in a bunch of projects. Now there's a new $30 million fund that just got set up. Kresge, Prudential, MetLife, Living Cities, NCB Capital, big new fund. And the reason we're so excited about that fund is because it is senior debt, it is 15-year term, it's 30-year AMs, it's 5% interest, and it's 120% loan to value. That's some good money. So we're trying to do 8 signature, about $5-6 million projects with that. A number of these that you've seen here that we're not done yet are going to take advantage of that funding to get over the finish line. That's going to make our lives a lot simpler to get these deals done. We still need a few incentives to make it work, but we don't need like 5 layers of incentives now to get at least those scale. It's not going to help somebody doing a 30 million. You know, you need to just, you know, that's not going to work. But somebody doing a 5 or 6, this could really, really make your project totally work. Anybody else?
Can I comment on the dollars? I would not let Sue's scale deter you though from movement. My sense is reverse engineer what you need to start with. Plus, Sue was an island for a long time, and there was no cooperation between Detroit Economic Growth and the Downtown Development Partnership and Sue and the New Center Council. It was non-existent. It didn't happen. Now we're seeing great synergies between those. So based on your current DDA and the economic development organizations and what may be already coming out of the anchors, you may need a completely different funding strategy. But reverse engineer it. Are you going to be in the development business? Are you going to be opportunistic in that business? Are you going to pick 10 prioritized pilots and do that for 2 years first? What about festivals, etc.? Reverse engineer the process, and it probably won't be as daunting as a $3 million a year budget.
And I do think a couple things to his point. So we work really closely with like 3 intermediaries, and the 3 of us are in almost every single thing together. Sometimes even as tenants, like Dave, who runs Invest Detroit, who's in like all my deals just about, he's actually going to be moving some of his funds out to be a tenant in one of my buildings, you know? So, I mean, we try to sit down and say, okay, this is the problem in getting this done. And then what is the solution? And then we just do whatever it is. And then we just get it done. Because you have to be very opportunistic in order to move some of this along. But as long as you have a good understanding that this, by doing this, it's going to cause these 3 other things to happen or go, that's where you really want to think about it. You don't want to just like run out doing without an idea of how that particular limited resource is going to end up parlaying into a number of other things. You have to really use your limited resources to get that kind of effect going. And then I think people will see that that's working and it'll become sort of a way you do business, which is the way we all do business now in Detroit, which is a very different way than, 5 years ago. So.
10, 15 years ago, 17 years ago when I first got here, your staff was how many?
Up until 3 years ago, we were 6 people, and we had a budget of about 800,000. And so that's clearly could be a very robust budget for you to start with. I mean, you could get a whole lot done with that kind of, because we did all that for 6 people. But now we've taken on tons more stuff in the last 3 years. That certainly we could not have done without the staff. But we certainly got a lot of the stuff moving and a lot of the base built for a lot of years with that number of staff.
When you started, they put in money, put your organization together.
When we funded, we didn't have a lot of money for anchors. We were founded back in 1976 by Wayne State with a small capital outlay grant from the state of Michigan that went for 20 years. It was $50,000. For the first 10 years, the organization had before I got there, one director and a half-time admin person, and they were housed at the Detroit Institute of Arts for free. That's all they had. I was brought in to work on community development, and there was a decision in 1987 that they wanted to get involved in community and economic development because by not doing so, they were not able to attract students and attract patients, and that was the motivation. So they ponied up a little more at the time, not a lot more. It wasn't really the anchors funding that intermediary, it was Dave who carried the water on an organization for decades. And then about 5 years ago, Kresge came in, then Ford came in, Community Foundation was always in too. I mean, not at the level, but they've been with us for years. But I mean, then you got the Kresges, the Fords, and now we have lots of other funders that are in the game. But for a good 15, 20 years, it was pretty much Hudson Weber, and that was it for the most part. So, you do have to have somebody who's going to be your base.
And then at some point, then the partners started developing their own property, or they started getting the money. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of things happened in real estate. Some of it was just we facilitated development by setting up funds and figured out, we need really flexible, long-term, subordinated funding for developers. Let's just start going out and building housing. I mean, so that was one of the first things. We also had the whole neighborhood made a National Historic District so everybody could just get the tax credits. I mean, we did a lot of things that benefited everybody. And I do think that one of the things that's unique about our organization's philosophy is that we're more about the whole system and the whole neighborhood than our own deals. Like, we do deals, but we only do deals if we think they're important and we can't get anybody else to do them. I'm happy always to have a partner be the lead and us just do what we need to do. Like, buy a property, turn it over to somebody we can trust, bring in a much bigger developer, take a small fee. They might even get the big fee. I don't really care, as long as the neighborhood is getting the right long-term use and management, and I know that that's going to be an asset going for a very long period of time with the neighborhood. A lot of other community development organizations, when things got tough, reverted more to, I got to get a fee on this deal, I'm going to focus all my energy on this housing project, and then the rest of the neighborhood stuff didn't go anywhere. So you really got to keep your eye onto, you're about creating a platform for everybody to come in, not just about your own organization's posture, because that can't work.
But the big funder can play a little different game. I think what changed, other than Sue getting momentum that was coming, Hudson Weber figured out to make this work, we had to press differently. So we got the anchors together and said, why aren't you? It's in your self-interest. And that was an 8 to 12 month process to make that go, which I was trying to describe. We still have one anchor that's not a nice player, not putting in enough money. And we were talking the other day about the new strategy to lean on harder. Somebody's got to be the hammer, and it can't be Sue.
Yeah, because they don't care what I thought.
And if Sue's trying to make it welcoming for everyone, serve everyone, keep all the projects moving, somebody's got to be the champion and the hammer. And we've somewhat stepped in that role, although the Kresge Foundation came in with us in that role. And now the anchors are policing themselves. It's the two other anchors that are saying, we're going to have a meeting with that CEO and make sure this happens.